who has brought all of us together. Ladies and gentlemen, warm welcome to you all to the IIC program, South China Sea, the Geopolitics thereof. I want to take you to the year 2016. 12th of July, the Tribunal of the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague gave a verdict on a case filed by the Philippines against the People's Republic of China. The tribunal rejected China's claim to the so-called 9-dash line. The distinguished panelists will tell you more on this so-called line. The tribunal added that to the extent China had any such claims, the said claims were extinguished. I repeat, extinguished by the UNCLOS, that is, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, that came into effect in 1994. India had significantly contributed to the drafting of the convention, and I wish to pay tribute to the late S.P. Jagota of the External Affairs Ministry, who led the Indian delegation throughout. Now, China is a party to the law. It has not implemented the verdict. Therefore, China has violated international law. We have to see China's behavior in the South China Sea in perspective as part of its general behavior, including at our border. It has further violated international law by changing the facts on the ground. How has the rest of the world responded to China's aggression? What has Quad, that is India, Japan, Australia, and the United States, done, and what can it do? All this the distinguished panelists will deal with. Incidentally, just because it is now known as the South China Sea, it does not follow that China owns it. Vietnam calls it East Sea. Historically, the name South China Sea was coined by Portuguese navigators who went to China from India in the 16th century. Does India claim any ownership of any island in the Indian Ocean based on the noun, the Indian Ocean? How has the rest of the world responded to China's violation of international law? Let us jump into the geopolitical waters of South China Sea. The waters are treacherous, but we have two panelists with expertise in navigation in such waters. The panelists are Admiral H.C.S. Bisht and Commodore R. Sheshadri Vazan. Neither needs any introduction. The panelists will speak for about 15 minutes or a few minutes more or less, and so that we shall have enough time for Q&A. Please feel free to type your observations and questions, because the IIC attaches high importance to what you have to say. The first to speak is Vice Admiral H.C.S. Bisht, PVSM, AVSM, former flag officer, Commander-in-Chief, Eastern Naval Command, and former Director General, Indian Coast Guard. Presently, he is an administrative member, Armed Forces Tribunal. He is speaking to us from Chandigarh. Admiral, please jump into the waters.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Fabian, sir. It is indeed a great pleasure and an honor to share my thoughts on this very contemporary subject. So, without further ado, I will start. I'll start my subject today. The first slide in the presentation today. I will give you a short historical background of all the important events or important activities that have taken place as far as this dispute is concerned. In 1933 to 39, France, who were the colonial masters of Indochina at that time, had controlled some of the features in the region. 1947, the control of the South China started with something called 11 dash line. By then, the Kuomintang government of the Republic of China, which presently is Taiwan. 1949 is the line that I've highlighted, and this was the time when the line was revised to a 9 dash line, which was a line drawn freehand by the Chinese cartographers. Incidentally, this activity had also been undertaken way back in 1929, but in 1949 it was done in a formal manner. 1974 is another important date where China attacked South Vietnam to seize the Yagong Islands in the Parasail group. 1978, President Ferdinand Marcos of the Philippines declared the northwestern part of Spratlys as Philippine territory. And 1988 and 1994, China occupied the Johnson Reef and Mischief Reef in a conflict with Vietnam and Philippines, respectively. 2002 was the declaration of the Code of Conduct in South China Sea as far as ASEAN nations was concerned. However, nothing much has happened on that. 2012 was a defining moment where the Scarborough Shoal was taken or seized by China, and that was a trigger for Philippines to take the matter to the Permanent Court of Arbitration at The Hague, which Ambassador Fabian had mentioned in his inaugural talk. 2013 to 2015, China undertook illegal reclamation of the islands. And 2016, as Ambassador Fabian mentioned, the PCA verdict was given against China by the Permanent Court of Arbitration. Now, what is the cause of the dispute? China claims nearly 90% of the South China Sea through the 9 dash line. The area far exceeds what is claimable under United Nations Convention on Law of the Seas and includes waters that are quite close to the coasts of all the claimant countries. The other cause is the huge presence of oil and gas. The United States has undertaken 2 independent estimates, and as per them, South China Sea holds about 350 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 23 billion barrels of oil in proven and probable reserves. China's estimates are literally double of that at 500 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 125 billion barrels of oil. And more than $5.3 trillion worth of trade passes through the South China Sea annually. South China Sea accounts for nearly 10% of fish which is caught globally. And with blue economy gaining traction in the world, countries now see tremendous opportunities for minerals in South China Sea, which also includes gold. And the other cause is China's high-headedness and coercion of smaller maritime neighbors in the South China Sea region. Coming to composition of the South China Sea, it contains over 250 small islands, atolls, reefs, etc. Most submerged at high tide, while some are submerged permanently. Features can be grouped as Spratlys, Parasails, Scarborough Shoal, Pratas Islands, and Macclesfield Bank. China, Vietnam, Taiwan, Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei lay claim to the islands. And China has also had skirmish with Indonesia, though Indonesia is not a direct claimant to the South China Sea. It has problems with China in the Natuna Islands. Coming individually to the various islands which have been militarized by China. First, the Spratlys group, Fiery Cross Reef, which is one of the big 3, that is Fiery Cross Reef, Subi Reef, and Mischief Reef. This is the southernmost island. And China has done it very strategically. They have developed 3 important islands at the geographical extremities of north, south, and east, so that they literally control the whole of South China Sea. And the total area reclaimed is 677 acres. Infrastructure available in this Fiery Cross Reef is a 3,300 meters runway, radomes and HF arrays for anti-access area defense philosophy which of China, hangars and helipads, and 6.25 square kilometers with enough berthing. Subi Reef is the largest outpost in the Spratlys, area 5.8 kilometers by 3.2 kilometers. Northernmost island in Spratlys, large naval harbor with 11 berths. Entrance to lagoon is 230 meters, which is a huge entrance. Again, 3,300 meters long runway, hangars, helipads, large radomes, SATCOM and DF antennae, emplacements for missiles, hardened fuel storage, facilities to track satellites, and also undertake military activity. Mischief Reef is the easternmost island in Spratlys. Extensive land reclamation of 5.58 square kilometers, large harbor, 3,100 meters runway, 7 radomes, air defense guns and missiles, and cement plant. Coming now to the Parasail group. So Parasail is in the Parasail, as you can see, is the northern group of islands. Spratlys was the southern group of islands. Parasail comprises 130 small islands, reefs, keys, etc. It is claimed by China, Vietnam, and Taiwan, but controlled by China. Woody Islands is the main island. It is actually the main island in the entire Parasail and Spratlys groups. Most structures have harbors capable of berthing ships. Woody Island is the northern edge of Parasail's 2,700 meters long runway. There's a large harbor, a detachment of marine surveillance unit, hangars for J-10 and J-11 fighter aircraft. There's a large number of surveillance radars, HQ-9 SAM battery, which has a range of almost 200 kilometers, surface-to-air missiles. Then YJ-62 anti-ship cruise missile, ASCM, a range of about 1,500 kilometers. A firing was carried out in 2016. And you can see in the slide, the lowermost slide, you can see a J-11 fighter aircraft, which is on the runway for takeoff. Scarborough Shoal is a huge shoal, area 150 square kilometers, perimeter 46 kilometers with a high tide elevation of nearly 6 feet. It is 120 nautical miles west of Philippines and 550 nautical miles southeast of Hainan Island of China. China started eyeing this shoal after US withdrawal from Subic Bay Naval Base and Clark's Air Base in the Philippines in 1992. And in 2012, China occupied this shoal after forcing the Philippine Coast Guard and fishermen from the area in a tense conflict that lasted for weeks. And this, ladies and gentlemen, was a trigger for taking the appeal to the International Court, the Permanent Court of Arbitration at The Hague. Pratas Island, also called Dongsha by China, comprises 3 islands in the northeastern South China Sea, 211 nautical miles southeast of Hong Kong, governed by Taiwan, also claimed by China. Macclesfield Bank, you can see Macclesfield Bank, an elongated sunken atoll of underwater reefs and shoals in the South China Sea, lies east of Parasail, southwest of Pratas, and north of Spratlys. Length is 130 kilometers with approximately 70 width of approximately 70 kilometers. It is one of the largest atolls in the world, completely submerged. Now, coming now to Vietnam's presence in South China Sea, Vietnam has undertaken only 57 acres of reclamation when compared to 3,200 acres by China, despite the fact that Vietnam has proximity to both these group of islands. It has 27 features in the Spratlys group, out of which only 2 islands are developed, and that too in a benign manner. The biggest one is Spratly Island. It is different from the Spratlys group. It is Spratly Island, the largest of Vietnam's outposts, houses a harbor and 1,300 meters runway. It was only up to 750 meters till recently. It has 2 hangars, has SIGINT and communication facilities. And the slide at the lower end shows another reef, which is called Pearson Reef. It only has a helipad and a radome. Now, coming to Philippines' presence in these islands, Thitu Island is one which Philippines occupies, has presence in 9 features. The main island is Thitu, being administered by Philippines since 1974, also called Pag-asa in the local Philippines language called Tagalog. China has also been claiming it and has been sending PLA Navy and Chinese Coast Guard CCG ships regularly. Incidentally, Chinese vessels were sighted more than 600 times near Thitu in 2019. Taiwan's presence, Itu Aba is the main feature which is occupied by Taiwan as a Spratlys, only 110 acres, largest natural feature in the archipelago, in the entire archipelago, 1300 meters runway and a small natural harbor. Zongao Reef, which also is in Taiwan's control, is 9 nautical miles away, which is shown down below in the lower slide. Now coming to militarization of the South China Sea by China, the facilities created by China are approximately 3-kilometer long runways on 4 islands. We have already seen that for both military and civil usage. Elaborate port infrastructure, including fuel and water storage for ships, hangars for storage of aircraft, large number of defenses, including missiles and guns, various types of radars, communications, EW electronic warfare, and other associated facilities. Facilities for enhancement of PLA's surveillance and intelligence capabilities, and early warning via HF arrays, which I mentioned earlier, for anti-access and area denial, A2AD philosophy to hold the US Navy at bay, and connectivity with the new STC, or the Southern Theater Command, and the PLA Rocket Force Command for control of DF-21 and DF-26 strategic missiles. Now, UN Convention of the Law of the Seas, UNCLOS. What is the relevance of what I'm showing you to the present crisis? UNCLOS says low tide elevations such as shoals, sandbanks, etc., that may become visible during low tides and artificial islands may not generate territorial waters except if located within territorial waters of a coastal state. Archipelagic states such as Indonesia and Philippines are permitted to establish the so-called strait baselines to join up their island territories and to extend such territorial and contiguous seas to cover wider areas than otherwise be lawful. And coastal states like China, this is important, coastal states like China are not allowed this provision. This provision only extends to archipelagic states like Indonesia and Philippines. Naval vessels passing through any foreign territorial waters and contiguous seas are not required to give advance notice or seek permission from a sovereign state as long as they undertake innocent passage. Now, what did the PCA ruling say? In July 2016, the PCA ruled that China's claims to historic rights over the South China Sea, encompassed by the 9-dash line, could not exceed its maritime rights under the Law of the Sea Conventions. The tribunal invalidated Beijing's claims to ill-defined historic rights throughout the 9-dash line. Scarborough Shoal, they said, was entitled only to a 12 nautical mile territorial sea. A large number of features are not legally islands because they cannot sustain a stable human community or independent economic life. Therefore, entitled only to territorial seas and no EEZs or continental shelves. In the Spratlys occupied by China, the court ruled that most of them are below water at high tide and therefore generate no maritime entitlements of their own. Final outcome of the PCA verdict against China was as follows. Beijing's activities in the Philippines EEZ, such as artificial island construction, interference with Philippines fishing and exploration activities, constituted a violation of sovereign rights of the Philippines. So, why is China so interested? First, I have already mentioned to you proven reserves of oil and gas. Next is control of the sea lines of communications locks through the South China Sea and to ensure energy security through the Pacific Ocean and also the Indian Ocean, since South China Sea literally connects the two oceans. Considers South China Sea and East China Sea, H.C.S. and E.C.S. as its own strategic backyard, plans to extend its reach to exercise A2AD strategy, which I have mentioned earlier. South China Sea provides good opening into the Indian Ocean region, where all big players want to gain easy access. Domestic and political factors, South China Sea is a matter of prestige for the Chinese Communist Party, for the CCP. President Xi Jinping has used the construction of artificial islands in the South China Sea to fan nationalist sentiment and strengthen his authority over the PLA. And control of South China Sea is a precursor to his Xi Jinping's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative project. Now, China's strategy in South China Sea is plans to group together tiny, widely dispersed islets with state baselines inside which it claims sovereignty over every feature and even the waters, thus nationalizing waters which were hitherto international. From the state baselines, the PRC claims territorial seas surrounding the entire group of islets rather than individual features. And despite international law on innocent passage, foreign naval ships are asked to obtain permission before sailing through South China Sea. And China sees South China Sea as an important constituent of the Southern Theater Command, STC. And it seeks to establish sovereignty throughout this H.C.S. littoral, including undersea resources, to displace the US from the region, and plans to form a strategic triangle with a major base on Woody Island, which is on Parasails, and secondary bases on Spratly Islands, and a similar base on Scarborough Shoal, thus forming the triangle of strategic control over South China Sea. And from the new military bases thus constructed, that means the headquarters literally on Woody Island and others on Fiery Cross Reef, Mischief Reef, Subi Reef, etc., China plans to create strategic bubbles from which to expand military operations outwards. Now, what is the fine print of China's strategy? China perceives threat from east and southeast coast, which is geographically hemmed in by US and its allies, that is Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, etc. South China Sea provides open seas for military operations, especially naval operations. An extension of strategic depth south and eastwards to protect the prosperous east and southeast coast, which is a Han Chinese majority in the coastal region of China. Security of the Yulin Naval Base in Hainan, which is home to the PLA Chinese nuclear deterrent or PLA Navy nuclear submarine fleet. Taiwan being a core interest for China, Beijing cannot exert full control over it if it does not have significant power in South China Sea. And with control over South China Sea, Beijing sees itself as a step closer to reunification with Taiwan. China is very suspicious of US strategy of pivot to Asia of 2011 and reconfiguration of the Pacific Command to Indo-Pacific Command. Now, this new term called Forsha Claim, China has coined a new phrase called Forsha Claim. Forsha means sand. And the Chinese felt that the 9-dash line was becoming too much of an embarrassment for them. So they have coined this new phrase called Forsha Claim. And the new narrative involves a shift from China's so-called 9-dash line, but covering literally the same area. Forshas heralds a more modest Chinese form of its claim in the South China Sea. However, experts believe that this is just another gimmick by China to justify its claim. This is a pictorial depiction of the Forsha Claim, where literally you can see the line in pink, which is almost same as the 9-dash line. Now, what is the role of the United States and the FONOPS, Freedom of Navigation Operations? US has vital strategic interests in the region, has got strategic partnerships with Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Taiwan, Singapore, etc. Large number of US military bases in the region, like 7th Fleet headquarters based in Yokosuka, Japan, Naval and Marine Corps and air bases, particularly in Japan and Korea. Almost 40 bases they have in the entire region. Korean Peninsula issue. China is vociferous in denouncing US presence in the region, stating that Chinese question US moral authority to intervene in South China Sea, being an outside power, and more importantly, being a non-signatory to the UNCLOS. Incidentally, US is a non-signatory to UNCLOS. Most countries see US providing security umbrella if China ever tries to coerce any one of them by military action. US Navy ships have increased their presence in the region recently. 2 carrier strike groups, Nimitz and Ronald Reagan Group, deployed along with a fleet of about 13-14 ships and about 200 plus aircraft. And US considers FONOPS necessary to maintain rule-based order. Role of ASEAN. ASEAN's solidarity of the 90s has been fractured due to China's big brother attitude and the checkbook diplomacy. We all know what is his checkbook diplomacy. China has isolated Philippines and brought over silence of a number of ASEAN members, started imposing an unspoken red line about the mention of arbitral award. It happened immediately after the award in 2016. China's coercive tactics were also against countries who spoke in favor of the arbitral award, like Vietnam, Singapore, Indonesia, etc. Philippines' appeal received muted support from most ASEAN members under Chinese coercion, and Chinese propagated this silence as a diplomatic victory for Beijing. And ASEAN, China, as I mentioned earlier, the code of conduct is only on paper. Role of international community: 33 countries support rule-based order and acknowledge the ruling, while 6 were opposed to it. US, UK, countries in EU, Australia, Japan, India, South Korea, and New Zealand have issued strong statements. Japan considers South China Sea to be its economic vein and can't see it in Chinese control. Has supplied 12 Coast Guard boats to Philippines. Has promised to lease a surveillance aircraft. Has also assured maritime assistance to Vietnam. South Korea is transferring an OPV, offshore patrol vessel, to Philippines. Countries in the region expect US to play a bigger role in the South China Sea to balance China's assertiveness. And I saw in the news recently that US has promised transfer of 90 very sophisticated medium-sized boats to Philippines. What are the implications for India? India's concerns are any instability in South China Sea will affect trade with ASEAN, India's largest trade partners, with a total trade valued at $71 billion in 2017. Nearly 55% of India's trade passes through South China Sea. India has excellent relationship with Vietnam. ONGC Videsh has investments in Vietnam. Bilateral relations with Philippines are improving. President and Prime Minister visited Philippines in 2019 and 2017 respectively. Numerous visits by IN ships. China is jittery with our
We seem to have lost the connectivity. Let us hope and pray for connectivity to be reestablished. Wasim, can anything be done to reestablish connectivity, please?
I'll have to check with Dr. Admiral Bisht. So just you continue, sir. Just I'm trying to connect with him.
Yes. We shall wait for the Admiral, who has given us such an exhaustive account, history, legality, and what is happening on the ground. Let's give him a little more time. Well, maybe we should proceed now. What we can do is that let us request the next speaker, that is Commodore R. Sheshadrivasan. And then later on, if the Admiral has anything more to say, he will rejoin us. Now, Commodore R. Sheshadrivasan is Director, Chennai Center of China Studies, and he's also Regional Director, National Maritime Foundation. He has decades of experience in teaching in universities, think tanks in India and abroad, including University of Bath, Nanjing University, Chatham House, to mention only a few. He is joining us from Bangalore, as I said earlier. Commodore, please jump into the waters. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I hope you can hear me. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Great pleasure being here, and thanks for this opportunity. I'm also happy to see Admiral Bisht back. And both of us did serve in the Coast Guard. He, of course, was the Director General Coast Guard, and I was the regional commander, many years before that. And so it's a great pleasure to connect with all of you. And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to discuss on this particular issue of the relevance of South China Sea to India and what developments are taking place. My biggest disadvantage today is that I am speaking after that wonderful presentation by Admiral Bisht. So it's quite possible that there's not much left for me as far as the content is concerned. But I'll try and see what I can share, and also perhaps have a little more time given to people for the question answer sessions. I'll just start sharing my screen. 1 second, give me a minute. Can you please confirm it's sharing? Are the slides visible?
Yes, I can see
All
it.
right. Yeah, thank you, sir. So basically, what I'm trying to look at is after that presentation, a lot of backdrop has already been provided by Admiral Bisht. So to certain extent, it makes my job simpler. In fact, after I looked at some of his slides yesterday, I did modify my slides so that I do not repeat what he's already said. So to that extent, I'll try and avoid repetition to the extent possible. So this was the scope of talk that was assigned to us by Ambassador Fabian when he got in touch with us. And these are some of the questions that we'll try and answer today. So, what has China done in violation of UNCLOS in South China Sea? Since when? And when did others start objecting? And apart from objecting, has any littoral country resisted? Some of these have already been answered. And you saw that though Philippines is a small country, it mustered enough courage to approach the Permanent Court of Arbitration and won the award in its favor in 2016, as was brought out. So, but the point is that nothing much has been done by anybody else. A mere freedom of navigation operations is not going to allow the smaller states to reclaim this island. The next one was of the geopolitical importance of South China Sea, which has been well covered by Admiral Bisht in terms of the geostrategic importance, in terms of importance of the fisheries wealth, the minerals, oil and gas that's contained in the South China Sea, and also more importantly, the importance to China to further its military and strategic ambitions. The ASEAN track record, we'll look at it a little more because I have taken it upon to see that we cover ASEAN's response. But as has already been brought out, there is not much that ASEAN as a collective community has done to take on the might of China. India's take capability to address the challenges. Well, it's very clear. In the recent past, particularly after the transgression in Himalayas, we realize that while we can hold off the challenge in the mountains, a lot of leverages can be brought to bear, perhaps only in the maritime domain. So how much can we do is again a factor of how much can you do on your own and how much you need to be able to do by alliances. This is where the Quad comes in. So I will discuss this a little more later. On the US policy, the pivot to Asia under Obama, under Trump, and of course now under Biden, what more can be expected? And do we see radical changes that are going to take place in South China Sea in the coming years? The Quad, the history, the Malabar exercises, and is the Quad vulnerable to pressure from China on Australia, Japan in trade and economic matters? And will China get away with what has done? And can it be stopped, or how can it be stopped? So now to understand this, I would like to go beyond just the South China Sea and look at China's expansive thrust. It's important to understand how all this is so well orchestrated. So look at this. It's basically using its economy, the economic power to possess deep pockets to support the Belt Road Initiative, call it One Belt One Road, or the Maritime Silk Road, and the instruments of investments for FDI routes, capturing of territory as in South China Sea, militarization of these islands which have been reclaimed by it, economic subjugation, aka the East India Company. So these are the economy has been a major factor which has given it the kind of capability to go ahead and launch its initiatives from Asia to Africa to Europe. And the other most important thing is that bide for time and, of course, build your strength and surprise the world. It's done it very well, except that post COVID, perhaps it did not bide for time enough. So the whole world is against China now. This perhaps one time, in my assessment, it's miscalculated the timing of its aggressive posturing, whether it's in South China Sea or Trans Himalaya. An empowered leader, you have a leader for life, Xi. So therefore, he has already said that what is China's dream, his dream too. So he is going to go out of his way to succeed because he cannot be seen to fail in some of these initiatives. The extended standoff, even in Himalayas today, is entirely due to the fact that he cannot be seen as losing his face to a small nation in comparison to what China has engaged in adventurism. And of course, the growth with Chinese characteristics, they are trying to sell this idea that China's Communist Party and the system has worked well for them, and it should be possible for others to emulate this. So it is the Chinese success story that she has persistently asked others, that is his, office bearers, his consul generals, his diplomatic missions, to sell this Chinese story, the success story. And then, of course, the battle space domination, as was brought out by Admiral Bisht also. Every island that is within the South China Sea has been militarized. There are military garrisons, there are SAM systems, there are runways. So these are now virtually the permanently anchored carriers. Because when you look at the geography, you'll find that the Chinese aircraft are limited in going beyond the first and second line of defense unless they have some place to refuel and turn around their operational assets. This is where this issue of battle space domination through militarization of the acquired assets comes handy. Then the strategic military clout to protect core interests. So here, they're again following the same old dictum, which is power from the barrel of the gun. Only thing is now it's become a DF-21 or a DF-26 or a satellite-controlled missile, which can take on the carrier battle group, which is their primary threat as far as China is concerned. And then, of course, there are specific targets. Unlike in other countries, they work to a target, and the major target of concern is just 5 years from now, when they are aiming to have a moderately prosperous community and be the number one by 2049, which is 100 years of the Communist Party. So this has already been shown. Just to re-emphasize, please look at the color code here. And what you see are the Parasail Islands right in the center. And of course, Taiwan, which is shown there. The Scarborough Shoal, the developments of which is covered by Admiral, so I'm not going to cover those. And then, of course, you see the proximity of Spratly Island, which is again right there, shown in the big circle over here. And this is the one which is there. So this is roughly tells you why China is so interested in shoring up its capability within the South China Sea, even though most of these are disputed. Now, this is the flashpoint that we are looking at. What was explained as Forsha or the Dine Dash line is nothing but this line that you see over here, all the way extending from here. And that tells you that it considers the entire South China Sea virtually as a lake in which it has full control. Even the idea of 9 dash line, as per the UNCLOS, is to ensure that whatever is claimed within the 9 dash line, if it is accepted, then they can use the provisions of UNCLOS for extending the exclusive economic zone, and also for ensuring that there is adequate control in terms of protecting their assets over here. So this is where it becomes important for us to know why China considers the entire South China Sea as something that it must control as if it is its backyard. So where does India come into the South China Sea? The trade interests, the Act East policy of India has already enabled us to have deep networks with countries there, whether it's Vietnam, whether it's Japan, whether it's South Korea. We have traditional linkages as well as diplomatic military exchanges with all this. And also, China has a big problem in terms of geography. Unlike India, which has access to both sides of the sea, as you see here, whether it is the Arabian Sea here or whether it is the Bay of Bengal, it has easy access in the Indian Ocean region. It is not for any other reason that it is also called the Indian Ocean. So China obviously is envious of the geographical advantage it has. And the usual term that we use is the hesitations of China to come into Indian Ocean because of the tyranny of distance. It has to cover tens of thousands of kilometers to reach its areas of interest, whether it's the anti-piracy missions here or whether it is the military base that it has in Djibouti or the Middle East for oil energy security. This is where it has its Achilles heel. So it is very concerned about it, and it would like to counter this by setting up bases here, which is not, of course, the topic of discussion today. But all this has relevance to not just what it is doing in South China Sea, but also what it aims to do in the Indian Ocean region by developing constituencies, by investing in smaller countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Maldives, and countries along the African coast. So this is something that will drive the geography of the future and the geostrategy of in the coming decades. So what is the evolving nature of Indo-Pacific? Because to counter whatever China does in the South China Sea, there are issues that we need to deal in the Indo-Pacific. Now, this term has come to be accepted, though yesterday you would have read the report that the Russian foreign minister was saying that India is perhaps being used by the big power in the so-called alliances of the Quad or the Indo-Pacific or the freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea. So this has become a top regional priority for Trump, and it's unlikely to change because this is part of the NSS 2017. And I've only pulled out some of this due to time constraints, which are of importance to us in the Indo-Pacific area. So this is what was brought out by the 2017 document. It said it's a geopolitical competition between free and repressive visions of world order that is taking place. China is also using economic inducements and penalties, operations, and implied military threats, obviously through the South China Sea, as well as militarization of Djibouti, and also continuous deployment of its military assets in the Indian Ocean, whether it is SSBNs or SSNs, or even his ships, which are regularly on patrol. And of course, promoting quadrilateral cooperation with Japan, Australia, and India. In fact, USA has placed a lot of importance in having this alliance. Despite some reservations initially, hesitations by Australia, even India was a hesitant partner. But China, in my opinion, has pushed both India and Australia, strongly into this alliance. It has a lot of potential, while there are also questions about how will it evolve. But it should not be abandoned just because you do not know what to do with it. So, what is the strategic underpinning of economy and trade? The Indo-Pacific Strategy of USA, as per the NSS 2017, is about fair and reciprocal trade and infrastructure investment from the World Bank and ASEAN Development Bank. This is important because there's a lot of money that's been earmarked for infrastructure development by China, and that's being invested along the Belt and Road initiatives. And also the importance of rule of law, individual rights, and freedom of navigation, all of this which has been violated by China, as has been seen in the incidents that I will quote a little later. And of course, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, who visited India, placed heavy emphasis on working closely with India on defense and security across the Indo-Pacific. Now, this is evident from the stream of various things which you have signed, whether it is Limova or MSSTA or BECA. There are slew of agreements that we have signed, and all this perhaps would provide some kind of a collective ability for the nations involved to contain China to a certain extent, particularly in terms of its aggressive behavior, both in the maritime domain and across the land borders. And ASEAN countries are limited. You might say whatever you want to about ASEAN's ability to take on China. Because of the economic dependence, they are not in a position to. And China believes in dealing with them separately on bilateral mode, and does not believe in dealing with ASEAN as a community because it knows that it can divide and rule. Which explains the behavior of China when it deals with the code of conduct or with some of the initiatives that have been proposed by other members of the ASEAN. And the code of conduct has been in the making for decades. And it is, everybody says each year that this will happen this year. But obviously, there are many doubts because China plays this just as it plays with India, saying that, we have, undemarcated borders. So it gives it a lot of flexibility to use this as a leverage, whether it is in the case of ASEAN or with India. And so here are some of the groupings that are there. All of these are important in terms of what is happening in South China Sea. Enough has been said about Quad and its potential. There are definitely questions. It's not a fully evolved platform as such, because though it started in 2007, and it was abandoned thanks to the resistance by China, which accused the four democratic nations of ganging together. But today, there is a situation that demands that these people work together. It need not be limited only to military responses. It can also take on many other roles in terms of climate control, in terms of providing humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, such and rescue measures, increasing the potential of other countries in ASEAN. So it is the possibilities are endless, but it is for these four nations to now put their heads together. Within India, now the MEA has a separate Indo-Pacific division, which also has the Quad. So you need to be serious about how you want this to shape for meeting our future requirements. ASEAN, we have said enough. It's unlikely that ASEAN as a collective group will be able to take on China, because with the RCEP, you'll find that there will be greater interaction. And with the abstention of India, you find that the trade deficit with individual ASEAN countries, as far as China is concerned, will be to its favor. I will not say much about IORA and IONS, maybe except in the question answer session to take it up and see what role it has, if at all, in taking on China. So, what is the power play contours in the ASEAN? These are some of the factors which must take note of. US has withdrawn from the TPP, and this led to a power vacuum, allowing China to come in a big way. India has deferred joining RCEP for very obvious and good reasons, but there are question marks on how long will you be away from RCEP and whether it will actually help your self-reliance, or will it give more advantage to China. These are questions that need to be taken up later. And of course, ASEAN members firmly are in the grip of China because of, like I said, the investments. People like countries like Cambodia, Philippines, and all that have learned it the hard way that they cannot even resist any of the proposals made by China. As far as Philippines is concerned, it's despite winning the award, Duterte was engaged by China. They promised him a lot, and even now he's realized that he fell into the trap, and now he's increasingly looking at USA and others to bail him out of a situation that he got into, expecting miracles to happen as far as the mutual relations are concerned. And Malaysia, when Mahathir came back, though a 93-year-old man, when he came back, he cancelled the BR projects because he realized the folly of getting money and without creating job employment for locals, and also getting into a debt trap. Call it check diplomacy or debt trap. The point is that Malaysia was able to negotiate a lot of these projects. And you realized recently also, even with the change of the uh, president, you found that there are new equations and they have cancelled one more project. So there are these developments that are taking place. Not everything is to the advantage of China, but it's for others to see where there are wedges which can be driven for ensuring that we derive benefit out of this. China now also has another phenomena within the South China Sea, where it carries out aggressive fishing in others exclusive economic zone. And we know, sorry, they even sank a Vietnamese fishing vessel. And this is supported by the maritime militia. This is a new phenomenon in South China Sea, where the fishing fleets go out into others' territory, and you find that they are hovering around. Even within the India, they are bordering just outside the exclusive economic zone, and when they know that there is no patrolling, they are poaching in our areas. So this is an aggressive kind of a fishing expeditions that they indulge in with the support of their coast guards. So this is a serious development both in the South China Sea as well as in the Indian Ocean region. And all the militarization of the reclaimed islands, I'm not sure how anybody can take back these islands, whether it's the claimant is Brunei or Philippines or Malaysia or whoever. It's highly unlikely that without a military conflict, any of these islands can be taken back. And America in the past has not even protested strongly. In fact, I think the world just stood by and watched the militarization of these islands, except for some protests here and there. Perhaps it has become too late for the international community to do anything about reclaiming of any of these islands and restoring it to the original owners. And particularly with the fact that China did not even want to get into the arbitration mode when Philippines went to the PCA. So, what is the prognosis? I just have two more slides, and we should be adequate for me to set the floor for questions. So, the inevitability of Cold War, the Cold War is already on. The trade warfare and technology denials have come in post-COVID. And you heard about 5G, you heard about smart chips, you have heard about various things that are happening. All these are part of the Cold War that is, developing in other areas as well. So this will also become inevitable as more and more people would like to reduce their dependency on China, whether it is ASEAN, whether it is members who are now the disputants in South China Sea. Any opportunity that is presented to them would be taken. But China is not going to sit back and say, okay, everything is okay and let the world take whatever they want to. So they will resist and they will use the money. There are trillions of US dollars in its custody, and it is in a position to use this. There will definitely be new alignments, not just Quad. but there'll be other kinds of alignments. And I did mention Quad Plus, so you could perhaps have South Korea, New Zealand, Australia getting in there if China compels them to get into this kind of effort. So China obviously is pushing some of these alliances, if you ask me, much to the detriment of its own long-term interests. The economic squeeze, without exceptions, through China appears slightly better placed because of, it's the only country that had a positive growth after COVID, whereas everyone else was on a negative bind. And hardening of positions of undecided players like India, who will hopefully overcome hesitations of history to chart a new course by aligning with interests, because India has made it very clear, including by our own external affairs minister, that we do not abandon our autonomy. The strategic autonomy is fully in place. It only means that we will align with interests, strategic interests. So if it means that we had to buy the 400 from Russia, we'll go ahead, S-400. And if it means that we had to buy a Predator drone from America, we'll go ahead. So most of this is to do with what we can gain from these alliances of national interest and long-term, which serve our long-term interests. So impact on global institutions, whether it is WHO, IMF, like WHO, America had withdrawn. With the Joe Biden coming back, there are indications that they'll perhaps join back. IMF, the loan terms and all that were not very favorable, which allowed China to come in a big way to help smaller nations. So there would be certain structural adjustment which must be encouraged by India. And creation of alternate pools for countering BRI MSR. And here I quote the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor. Just India and Japan have been talking about it to help out the developing countries in Africa and Asia. But for this to happen and to provide a credible counter to BRI funds, you need more countries here. You need the European Union, you need the USA, you need others who can come and have a pool of money over here, which can counter the investment and influences that China is wielding in smaller countries who are looking for money. Every country requires investments. Everyone requires infrastructure and development. Every country requires job. So if this can be facilitated by any fund, they will not hesitate. Why are our neighbors going to China? It's because we are not in a position to provide the kind of money that is there. Therefore, I think collectively we need to be able to provide this kind of assistance, economic assistance, infrastructural assistance, military assistance to smaller neighbors who otherwise perforce would be driven to China, whether you like it or not. And increased military posturing and spending is inevitable. Now you've seen that India has also given a lot of freedom to ensure that our military preparedness is not brought down. And so this will be the pattern across nations, whether it's Japan or India, or Australia. You will see increased defense spending. So some nations, obviously, the advanced defense industry will be very happy with this development, but I don't think that's a good sign. But that's something that we have to contend with. So this is an interesting statement. Once you read it, you'll realize how prophetic this one is. I will, towards the end, tell you who said this. If one day China should change her color and turn into a superpower, if she too should pay the tyrant in the world and everyone subject others to her bullying, aggression, and exploitation, there are no doubts that it's happening now. The people of the world should identify her as a social imperialism, expose it, oppose it, and work together with the Chinese people to overthrow it. Surprise? Here is the gentleman who said this in 1974. So whether he was playing to the gallery, whether he was trying to integrate China better by saying that we are very conscious of our role in international mechanisms, that's now debatable. But the point is that this is the statement that it has made. Therefore, we just need to follow the prescriptions of Deng Xiaoping. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Commodore Vasan, for that insightful, multidimensional, and yet very lucid presentation. And you are ending with that quotation from Deng Xiaoping in 1974. That was very, very, what shall I say, remarkable. We shall certainly carry that. Now, I just want to tell Admiral Bisht that when we lost connection with you, I was telling the audience that you gave us a very history-rich and, what shall I say, geopolitical rich presentation. Now, if you have any points to add, we shall wait for you before we go to question and answer.
I think the net went off at the last slide, the conclusion slide. So, is that right, sir? Did you see the conclusion slide? I think that was the conclusion slide where I also noticed the net going off.
Thank you. We saw that,
Yes,
and
sir. So nothing further, sir.
thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have had a very eventful excursion into the treacherous waters of the South China Sea. I have some questions here from the audience. Let me see. I will go one by one. There is a question from S.P. Gore. Is there any way to make China follow the ruling of International Court on the Philippine petition? And Shri Gaur has one more question. I thought, those questions can be answered together. What impact, if any, Quad will have on Chinese expansionist moves? Now, I was just thinking, I'm changing, what I said. That is, considering that it's almost, 5 o'clock, is it? I would add one more question, and that is from Shri Anurag Tapil, Dehradun. With two other members of Quad, part of RCEP, how long can India keep out of it? So let us do it this way, that we shall ask each of the panelists to answer all the questions. Who would like to go first? Yes, Commodore.
All right, sir. I think there are important questions because we are trying to come to grips with the developing situation today. And these are real challenges that we have. Coming to the how to make China, accept the PCA verdict, I see no future. It's very simple. They did not even participate in the negotiations. And as per the UNCLOS, when the tribunal asked them to participate, they said we don't even acknowledge the fact that there's a dispute. So if this is the state, how do you get them to the table? Without a war. And also, even America, as Admiral also brought out, it has signed the UNCLOS, but it has not ratified it. There's an important aspect of signing and ratification. Whereas China, India, and all that, we also ratified it using our domestic law. So unless the domestic lawmakers uphold the ratification within USA, at least on paper, appears to lose the moral ground for telling China what to do, which is what China will say. So, China has to be integrated into the rule-based system, which is what we are finding difficult today. And I do not see anything happening as far as making China accept the verdict of PCA. It will not happen because physically it is occupied these areas. It is important to it economically, strategically, politically, and nobody can take it back from it today. That is the reality. And it acknowledges this reality, and therefore it is happy with the status quo. So I do not see the status quo changing. On the other issue of Quad, remember, it is not something that happened today. It started in 2007, and at that time there was a lot more hesitation because the expectation was that China would get integrated better, and therefore it's no point ruffling the feathers of China, which is why Australia and India were a little more sensitive to China. But the time has come not to be sensitive about China. How many occasions have we seen China being sensitive to India's concerns? Whether it's an exercise or militarization of Pakistan, supplying nuclear missiles, submarines, ships. When has they been sensitive to our concern? Or in the recent standoff? So, I don't think we should worry about the sensitivities of China and ensure that Quad, if China was not worried about Quad, why would it talk about it so vehemently? Obviously, it has the desired effect of being able to apply some kind of a pressure. And so we feel that we should be able to, use Quad as an instrument of being able to apply pressure to China on many counts, not just use Quad, but there are many other things which are there. On the RCP, the right point which was brought out, which is to say that two of the members are also RCP members. Therefore, their trade interests can only be perhaps protected by engaging with China. But that is a real fact. But there's not enough analysis within India to say why the RCEP signing by India was bad, the timing was bad, and it's in our interest today, according to analysts. I'm not an economist, but I read the economist analysis, which clearly tells us that if we had signed RCEP, then it would have been further trade deficits, and China would have used all the third countries to export everything by manufacturing it there and getting the concessions of RCEP. Therefore, we have to continue to keep working. The next 10 years are very, very challenging for us, and we need to use everything to help us as far as our own trajectory is concerned. Thank you. Over to Admiral now.
Yes. Now, before that, I just want to add a point to what you said about the Philippines. You see, what happened was that when the Philippines went to the court, Duterte was a candidate. And as a candidate, he had said that he had given it on a video, which was probably given to a Chinese channel. He had said that, look, if I get elected, I will make sure that Philippines doesn't will withdraw the case. Now, why did he do that? Because his election was funded by China. And the point here to remember is that China has done it in one or two other countries, including Sri Lanka. And there have been reports that it has done it in Australia, and it may have done it in Nepal. So we have to bear that in mind. Over to you, Admiral.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, my sincere apologies for going off the screen towards the end of my presentation. That was the last slide, and unfortunately, it was a BSNL Wi-Fi network which had gone off. But thankfully, we came back after some time. Coming to these questions, first of all, regarding the PCA verdict. First of all, the PCA verdict was, or Philippines going to the international court, the Permanent Court of Arbitration, was a culmination of years of desperation. Actually, in 2011 and 12, the President Hu Jintao, during his time, the taking over of Scarborough Shoal had come up as a proposal to him. But Hu Jintao, being a good statesman and since he was a milder personality than Xi Jinping, was very reluctant about permitting China to take over the Scarborough Shoal. But the problem was within the Communist Party. Hu Jintao, especially by his successor Xi Jinping, was seen as a weak leader. And in 2012, that was the last year of his presidency, he did not want to leave the legacy of being seen as a weak leader by his successors. So very reluctantly, he agreed to Scarborough Shoal being seized by China, and that was a trigger, like I had mentioned, for Philippines to go to the international court. And Xi Jinping, on taking over as the president, within the first month of his taking over as president, he had visited the Chinese Coast Guard units and the People's Armed Force Maritime Militia, who had been instrumental in harassing the Filipinos in submitting to the Chinese, or in the Chinese takeover of Scarborough Shoal. And the president, Xi Jinping, in the first month of taking over, applauded the Philippines Coast Guard, the PLA Navy, Philippines Coast Guard, and the People's Armed Force Maritime Militia. So this was, as is very clear, it was in their agenda for many years. So like Commodore Vasan said, they did not participate in the various proceedings of the PCA verdict, and they outrightly ignored even after the verdict had been announced. They outrightly rejected the verdict, saying that it is of no consequence to us. So therefore, Chinese bullying tactics, high-headedness, is something that comes to the fore in this. Coming to the next question of Quad, how can Quad come in the way of, or can dilute the expansionism of China? I would only like to say that all said and done, as far as military power is concerned and the usage of military power is concerned, there is a world of a difference between, as far as my understanding goes, between US and China. China may have the numbers, but actually US has got so many years of experience, especially their carrier battle groups, their air forces, the technology they use. is way ahead of what China has. So India, the Quad exercising together and carrying out very complex exercises, the scope and complexity of the exercise is massive, and the especially an exercise like Malabar extends to almost 10, 11 days. I have myself participated in 4, 5 of them, and they are very, very intricate exercises. So this Malabar exercise has got two components. One is the military component, which is the naval part of the exercise. The other is the diplomatic component, where these exercises are held to send a very clear message. And the message as of now is very clear that four important maritime powers, that is India, that is US, India, Japan, and Australia, are together in sending a message to China against their expansionism. So, Quad stands for Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, and this is the Malabar exercise, the maritime component of that. Probably in due course, we will also have other services participating in a bilateral manner to send a very clear message to China as far as their expansionism is concerned. As far as RCEP is concerned, Regional Comprehensive Economic Plan, I agree with whatever Commodore Vasan has said. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. I have a question to both of you. Sometime back, there were reports that when ONGC Videsh was active near Vietnam, some Chinese boats came nearby and said, please go away, please go away. What happened?
Shall I say?
Go ahead, please. Admiral first. Admiral first.
We have the ONGC Videsh has been allotted two blocks, Block 127 and Block 128. The government of Vietnam is very keen that India remains invested. The ONGC Videsh remains invested. Though 127 is not, there is no production happening in 127. 128, the production is not to the economic standards, but due to the treaty of friendship that we have with Vietnam, Vietnam is very keen that we stay invested there. And China has been very wary of it. China has made a number of overtures as far as we are concerned. I don't know. In 2011, you may be aware, I was commanding the Eastern Fleet that time, and one of our ships, INS Airawat, was 45 nautical miles away from the Vietnamese coast. And that is the time that some Chinese aircraft came, and the aircraft told other Indian naval ship to stay out of the Chinese waters. We were close to Vietnam waters, but they made the aircraft had said remain outside Chinese waters. So there was no confrontation or anything like that, but there is a lot of symbolism in that. And in my slides, I had mentioned that China expects all foreign naval vessels to take permission before passing through South China Sea, which is completely in violation of international rules of innocent passage. As far as UNCLOS is concerned, ships can even transit through the territorial waters of a coastal state as far as the transit is innocent, or the passage is innocent. So the long and short of all this is that China is very wary of India's friendship or India's assistance to Vietnam, and they always do some sort of mischief whenever either our ships are there, or either whenever when the production was going on, when 127 and 128 both were heavily invested in properly, when the Videsh was active in that. Commodore Vasan, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Admiral. I totally endorse what you have said. I just only want to cover two other aspects of this, not on the ground as to what is happening, whether it's Oil Videsh Nigam, which wanted to carry out exploration, or whether it is any vessel which came on behalf of Malaysia. No, their response has been the same. Petromax, I forget the name, but they were carrying out oil exploration in the EEZ, which belongs to Malaysia, and they applied the same rule to say, no, you withdraw them. So the company came under pressure and they withdrew it, but they said we already finished our exploration. The point is, when it comes to their claim of the exclusive economic zone, they are so sensitive, and they have categorically said, the official statement said that we should not do anything in disputed areas. Now, I just posed this counter question in many of the forums, including China, and said that what are you guys doing in China POK economic corridor? Is it not? We are not saying it's a disputed area, but in the worst standards, you can consider it a disputed area. Why are you investing there? There are no answers. So it's a typical application of double standards as far as China is concerned. They will continue to use their economic power and military power to try and get them what they want. So I don't think whether the American ships or the Indian warships or whatever who are transiting the South China Sea or in these exclusive economic zones which are disputed are really worried about China's challenges. So we ignore them and carry on. As Admiral rightly brought out, there are international conventions, and according to UNCLOS, you can even pass through the territorial waters as long as it's an innocent passage. So all the passages that have taken place are related to innocent passage. And as far as Oil Videsh Nigam is concerned, if Chinese can come and invest anything in Pakistan, I don't see why we cannot invest in Vietnam or Malaysia or Indonesia or wherever they have a dispute. I would go to the extent of saying wherever they have a dispute, we should go and pitch your flag. Thank you.
Correct.
Well, thank you. I do not have any other question, but I have an observation from Vice Admiral P.J. Jacob. Well, I had the privilege of being with him in Iran before and after the revolution. He has given this observation from Bangalore. Very exhaustive and thought-provoking presentations with interesting suggestions for the way ahead. Now, before closing, I shall just make a few points, not new points, but just to re-emphasize some of the points already made. One is that whatever space China has occupied, it's a fait accompli. There is hardly any prospect of, throwing China out of that space. Much will depend on what the United States does under Biden. All that we can say is that there is an across-the-board consensus in the United States that China is the rival and that China's rise has to be stopped and reversed. And Biden will be more mature than Trump has been. He will be less impulsive. So we will have to wait for that. As regards Quad also, well, every member of the Quad is important, but primarily it will depend on the United States. Now, also, both Japan and Australia are vulnerable to commercial, economic pressures from China. The whole thing has to be seen in perspective. And it is possible that China has miscalculated. It is also possible that China might, I repeat, might recognize it as miscalculated, because if you notice, they have made some gestures towards Japan and South Korea very recently. So it's an unfolding story. We have had a very vigorous, interactive, multidimensional discussion. Let us give a big hand to the two distinguished panelists, and let's also give a big hand to the audience. And we also thank the audience as well as Tete, the head of the program division of the India International Center. Thank you. Also,
thank you very much, sir.
Also to Wasim, the support team of the IIC.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Jai Hind.
Thank you. Jai Hind, sir.